Good evening, everyone. My name is Ruud Meij, and this is Don't Give Up Ukraine, our 16th broadcast, if I'm counting well. And today our subject will be 100 days of war. Because tomorrow the war in Ukraine lasts already 100 days. So when I look back in our Dutch newspapers, in the first days of the war, everybody wrote like this will be over in a couple of days. The Russians are overpowering Ukraine, but that was not the case. And now we are in 100 days of war. We have experienced this like, for some times, like a roller coaster. We have seen Bucha, we have seen remarkable resilience. We're now seeing again in the East, we have seen our allies responding slowly, but in the end, helping Ukraine, so to say. And there's much to think about what is it what we are experiencing, and maybe, but what I've learned is so complicated is to look forward in this time of war. So, but maybe we can see some direction that the future will take. So I'm very glad that we have with us Orysya Bila, Bogdan Pankevych, Michiel Driebergen, and Iryna Starovoyt. And the four or the five of us will look in this hour back to what happened, how we experienced the war, and whatever comes up on our path. And maybe you all can give a short introduction of yourself to our audience. Orysya?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Orysya Bila. I'm from Lviv and Lvivian. I'm a philosopher. I work in Ukrainian Catholic University where I teach philosophy, and I'm also a head of the master program in theology. So that's about me.
Yep. And you're staying now in the Netherlands, huh? Oh.
Yes, and currently I'm staying in the Netherlands with my dear friends.
Yeah, thank you.
Michiel?
So yes, I'm a correspondent from the Netherlands in nowadays mostly Ukraine. So I'm working in Ukraine, bringing my stories to the audience in the Netherlands for readers and for listeners to the radio. This is what I'm doing for around 10 years now. Now in the Netherlands for 1.5 weeks. We'll be back in Ukraine from Wednesday.
Thank you, Michiel. Bogdan?
I'm Bogdan Pankevych. Difficult to tell what I'm doing now. I'm very little bit as a volunteer. Part-time, I train in the military territorial groups. And we are now like a pensioner. I don't have a job now. It's hard time, but I'm always monitoring what is going on, what clever people are thinking, and especially all of us are busy about future, because everybody 100% believe that we will win.
Good, thank you very much. And you have been also honorary consul of the Netherlands in Lviv?
In the past, 6 years ago, for 20 years.
Yeah. Iryna?
I'm Iryna Starovoyt. I speak from Lviv. I teach at Ukrainian Catholic University at the program of cultural studies. And I also am an acting writer and a board member of Ukrainian PEN.
Yeah. And also you published this book in English, eh? You say no, I forgot the title. You have to hit me.
In 2017, a book of mine have been published by Lost Horse Press in the US, and this is bilingual book of poetry called A Field of Foundlings.
Yes, yes. And everybody wants to hear and to see that can look at one of our live streams where you were our guest before and you read beautiful your poems. Okay, thank you very much for this introduction, Bogdan. I'm very curious for all of you how you what are for you important experiences, memories of these last 100 days. Of course, maybe difficult. But Bogdan, you were actually one of the first in this broadcast. If you look back at these 100 days, sorry, what would you say? What was for you the most remarkable? What you will remember, or what you see as, well, this was actually I will never forget?
I will never forget Lviv railway station in the first months. I will never forget refugees who guessed in my home for 1 week and more. I will never forget this rocket attack on Lviv, just city of 60 kilometers of EU border, and especially tragedy on the car service station of men I know very well. And when I also make a service of my car, where people die and everything was ruined, what he built for 25 years. Many things, and especially my friends who are fighting in East. Lectures they do later when they come here for short rest, and especially very different news from, yes, soldiers have 100%, everything is organized, and real phone calls that what they really need and in what real condition they are. It's a big analysis of our state and of our society, a real exam, what we pass, and real test when we show very openly what is a realistic situation with our society, with our state, with our military situation of army, with our economy. Maybe later I can tell it, but all people I speak with, they are thinking what will be after our victory. We should not, as after 2 Maidans, again the power arrive in oligarchs' hands. We should not repeat this for the 3rd time, because price is extremely high. Thousands and thousands people die. We should not forget this price, and we should not give up again. We should change the country. Is the main message. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to ask the same question to all of you. So, and you all have, of course, your own perspective and your experiences. I'm very curious, Michiel. You have been there several times and traveled to Ukraine. If you're looking back to what you have witnessed, what makes the biggest impression of you?
Well, I'm happy that within this 100 days, so to say, I at least could finish my circle in Ukraine that I started the first day of the war, or the big war, so to say. I was in Kharkiv. I was actually trying to have a rest from some very intense days in Luhansk region. The days before the war started already there. So we had been in shelters for several days, several times. And then we were in Kharkiv. We were going to the zoo in Kharkiv on the 23rd, and with some kids from Luhansk, which we evacuated. I'm a journalist. I'm not a humanitarian aid worker, but they ended up in our van. So we had to take them to Kharkiv, these kids from Luhansk region. And it appeared that from the 24th, we had to take them to west of Ukraine. because the big war started. So the war was hunting for us, so to say. So I had been working in Luhansk region for some days, and then we went to Kharkiv to escape from this intense shooting, and the war came after us, so to say. What I'm saying, we ended this circle because I went back to Kharkiv 2-3 weeks ago. It was like an empty city. But I'm happy that I expected the 24th of February that I would not be able to return to Kharkiv. But it worked. Some first coffee houses were opening the doors again. So this very vibrant, strong mentality of people who, although they really don't know what will happen, especially in Kharkiv, it's so close to Russia, and will there be a future for this city? It's unclear, but for me personally, it was like felt like I remember we returned the 9th of May. It was the Victory Day. So of course not in Ukraine, but it felt like a victory, and it gave me some hope that although you expect that nothing good will come out of this situation, that at least, well, the Ukrainian army simply is doing well there in Kharkiv, and they were really hunting the Russians away. And we were close to the front line in May last month, near Kharkiv, in all those villages which are liberated by the Ukrainian army. Well, it's like it's a real war there, of course, and it will take some months, I guess, longer before it will end there. If it will ever end, I don't know. But at least this was my circle the last months. I've been in different places, but well, it gave me some hope that, but we are really, for me as a journalist, where I can come, where I can reach, it really depends on the Ukrainian army, where I can work. This is what I was realizing at that moment.
Thank you. Orysya, if you were looking back to this 100 days, what's what you think? Well, this is my experience. This is what I find really remarkable, and will never forget.
Well, this was a moment for me to think. First thing is this: why this happened to us? I think one of the most difficult things in this war was a question of a job. This why all of a sudden this happened to us, and when you were saying about the 100 days of war, I actually thought that in the last 100 years the Ukrainian nation did not have a single generation of not having this interference with the imperial power of Russia. Every generation suffered, and it feels like it's some kind of a quintessence that is happening right now, that we are going through. And for us, of course, for me as the philosopher and also as the mother, it was a matter of a sense. How do we create a future where we have a place for our own subjectivity? It's not anymore a war of the resources. It's a war of where we fight for our subjectivity, for our identity. And therefore, as Bogdan said, we believe that we will win it, but we will have to win it. Otherwise, it's not the matter that we lose our country, it's the matter that we lose ourselves. We will not be anymore there. So this was it's really a war of the despair and hope.
Despair and hope.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is really an existential moment for us, for all of Ukrainians, and I'm really one of the most biggest experience also about the global world. Me with my daughter, we crossed the border months after the beginning of the war, and it took me really a big courage to leave the city. I really did not want to. I hoped to the very end that I don't need to go. And at some moment I understood that it's probably not a matter anymore for my own desire, but also for security of my own kid. And then it's a solidarity and support from people that you know, from people that live 1,000 kilometers from us, like you, also your family. We ended up in your family at the end. It's actually the other side of the Europe. It's geographically we are as far as possible, right? But that is how big and how small this world is today. So it's like this.
Yeah, thank you. And Iryna, what is your experience of these 100 days?
Looking back, I must say that within these 100 days, time was running different than I experienced before. I think the first days were like weeks or probably months. The first weeks were definitely like months, and I don't feel like it's just one season of the war. It's really, for me, it's like the full circle somehow is now over, and some other period, some other episode is coming and unfolding. I will never forget that this big war started in the night of my mother's birthday, 82nd birthday, and she has been born as a child of war. It was the Second World War. And she never expected to be a senior citizen of 82, moving, sleepwalking into another big war. I remember well words of my grandfather back in 1980s when I was only a kid or probably a young teenager. He told someday, replying for some of my questions, "Kid, my dear, we did everything that it never happened for you, for your generation." So I can only build up on what Orysya has said, that at least 2 generations of recent Ukrainians escaped direct confrontation with imperial Russia or with a big war. So my generation was spared, and the generation of my daughter, who is now 20 years old, has been spared of that experience. So if not 2014, if not annexation of Crimea and the beginning of the war in the Donbass, probably we would even can say that our relations with Russia normalized, that there was a peaceful divorce from Soviet Union back in 1991, and everybody can have its own happy ever after. But it turned out that it's not true, at least not for Russia. I will never forget how pacifists go to war. Because believe me, in my circle, in my milieu, there were no many people, or probably no people at all, who would dream of going to war or who would dream of military service. But actually they had no much choices, and I probably will never forget all kind of hard decisions my friends, my relatives, my acquaintances had to took up and somehow fulfill. And I also will never forget how many check-in messages I have got in the very early morning of February 24 of my different friends and colleagues from abroad. I never thought of myself that I have so many friends, and I felt like I'm bathed in the attention and support. And it was very, very serious that people with whom I only probably spent 3 days in my life or 1 week in my life, they were honestly offering all possible support. They opened their hearts, they opened their wallets, they opened the doors of their houses just to save me. And I just have been trying to explain that not everybody will flee. And it's important that you receive those who are now closer to the front line and leave us relatively safe. So it is by now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this. So you could say that this this war in a sense, you could say. My wife just bringing some coffee, so I will cut this out. So thank you very much. But I just came up with a question when I was thinking about it. That's just about this. You could say that this war had so many different dimensions. It is this personal thing that you are affected by the war in a daily way. It is inescapable, so to say. And maybe it also changes something in yourself. I remember one of our guests in I don't know who it was, but he said, so well, I never could have thought that I would be someone who say, okay, but you have to kill someone, or you have to be a soldier and kill someone, and before 24, and now I think I quite think so. So I was never a pacifist, but now I think we have to protect themselves, and we have to kill people on the battlefield. So this was really changed my personal view of what I think I would be capable of. And then you have, of course, this political side, this international side, and so on. And for my idea, this war affects us all on these levels in the same time. Personal, political, Ukraine, Europe, the Netherlands, my family, the world. And so that makes this really a very different kind of war than I have experienced until now, so to say. And I'm thinking about the Cold War and so on. But how was that for you? Do you first of all, maybe this personal thing? In what sense did it affect you? I don't know just to take the word. Bogdan, maybe you make an opening move.
I will better to tell about more general things, but then I will give a floor to those who want to speak from personal experience. I will tell later. Thank you.
Okay, good. But is there someone? Did it personally affect you? This war? Did it change your view of yourself, or the things you were thinking? Well, this is my. I think I'm more talking about myself than about you, because it did for me. So it did affect me personally in the sense what I had to do in this world. And I'm curious if this is something what also counts for you.
How was it for you, Ruud?
Well, in a certain sense, the same as for you. So it was February 23 and it was February 24, and then the whole perspective of my being in this world changed. And it means that I'm thinking, like I said, more or less what Orysya said. It is like hope and despair being there at the same time. And the second step is that, like Orysya and Bogdan also said, we have to win this war. It's not so if we can win this war, we have to win this war. And this was also for me for the same thing. Was the case. So my first thing was, what should I do in this world from the Netherlands to make it possible that we win this war? That was very clear from the beginning. And then the first step would be like, so that I have to be there for you. That was my thing. So, and a lot of things come on your path that you don't plan. So. As you all know, Orysya and Melania are now staying with us, so to say. But that's how I see it. I have to be there for you, and that's maybe something what's so clear for me. So
I believe you just described one major sentiment of this war inside Ukraine as well, because I believe that society mobilized in that in that way in the rear and even on the front line, that we have to be there for each other, that we have to hold on and survive together, that there is now the level of trust, mutual trust and resilience and social glue between us that was not present before. And I believe that there is a bitter feeling and a dramatic feeling. There is no return in time into February 23, 2022. So Nevertheless, the war will be over, and Ukraine will come out of this war probably stronger, spiritually stronger, and in terms of human capital, stronger than it came into it. Nevertheless, there will be no return to the point February 23, not only for people in the frontline areas, not only for Ukrainians as such, not only for Ukrainian refugees in other countries, but also for Europe and even for America, I believe. So for people who pay attention, for people who think and bother to think about what's happening indeed, I believe there will be no point of return, and the more so, there will be no point return for Russia.
Yeah.
Ruth, if I
Yeah.
may, after your words, I think I want to tell a few sentences. First of all, as a man from Ukraine, my grandfather fought in 1819, and they does not succeed. My father, as a young boy, come to underground in 42, and then he also was in this army, insurgents army, who doesn't succeed. And now I am the third generation, but it came too late. I'm 64, and it should be my job to finish it, but I'm too old. Then what I can do, I just do my best to support, to replace these youngsters who go to the east, to replace their job in Lviv, to be ready for it. And don't give this job for further generations, for my grandchildren, for instance. We have to finish this job now, because as long Russia will stay as empire, this country will try to finish Ukraine as a nation, as a fact. We should do this job. Of course, it will be not soon, but I hope the fights will end till the end of the year. And later we have to live as Israel lives. We have to live being every day ready, to be strong enough that they will not try to repeat. This is our job.
Okay. No, this is our. I don't wish such a kind of future for you. So, in the sense that you have the idea that you are encircled with enemies who make every moment of for Ukraine in the future a kind of an existential, potential existential crisis, that we can offer you something better, Bogdan. That is what I hope for, and that's what I struggle for. So,
be realistic.
Be realistic. Yeah, that's a good question. Michiel, if you listen to this, what comes up to your mind as a journalist, but also as someone who was really a good observer, as journalists be? So
it's difficult to say, because all the things I learned about, not necessarily about my job as a journalist, because you always need to have some distance, right, and some objectivity, which is always questions, for us as in our profession, so to say, how far can you go to support some stance, etc. This is a struggle of survival, I think, for Ukraine. So I think also the solidarity which we are seeing in Ukraine, which is very, very impressive. For me, solidarity belongs to Ukraine. I've seen it many times before, much more and much stronger than in the Netherlands, also before this war, this big war started, so to say. But now it's even stronger, and it's very impressive. But I realize more and more that this is also part of this struggle for surviving. It's necessary to be together now, and to forget about differences, and to fight together, and to agree with each other about most of the things, and to help each other, to support each other, to give free places to refugees, etc. It's very impressive to see this. At the same time, it's really difficult for me to see that the other part of this, how to say, medal, is also anger. I think there is lots of anger in Ukraine. And this is painful sometimes for me to see like people who, indeed, there are people who never thought about fighting or killing someone, right? Like you described, Ruth, and now they do. And I understand it now, which means that I am also part of this reality, that I'm starting to understand that people are thinking in this way. But anger also becomes every now and then hate, and like real furious hate. I see it. I really try to see it as it is and to not judge about it. I come for many years in Ukraine. I'm working. I mean, I feel it like, especially, I mean, I feel it almost like my reality, so to say. But at the same time, in these circumstances, I feel very close. At the same time, I feel this distance. I'm not Ukrainian. I'm a person from the Netherlands, and I can always go. So when I'm crossing the border, I'm out of this reality. And it will always be my problem also. But at the same time, it's easy for me. It's much easier for me to speak and to. So I'm trying not to judge. I'm trying to describe. I'm trying to see how things are working when such a big war suddenly starts and is killing you simply.
So can you say, and it's maybe for all of you, maybe for so what's puzzling me about this war after 24 February 24 is that when I'm thinking about this war, this is, for me, in my experience, every war is cruel, every war has a lot of bloodshed, and every war in a certain sense is in that sense unjust. It shouldn't have happened to people. But for me, this war is something different, not in its cruelty, maybe also, by the way, but especially in what this war is about. Yeah, so this is not, like Orysya said, not a war about resources, gaining land or whatever. This is a war of something different. I could also say it's like a war already slumbering for a century in European history, for instance, or maybe longer. So how do you see that? What makes this war different from other wars, in a certain sense, not but different from other wars? Or am I totally wrong in a sense that you say, no, this is just regular stuff. This is what war is, and there's nothing special about that.
Can I just add, because add to you, I think, Ruud, and then I mean, it's not up to me, I think, to answer this question, but what I see, I work with war photographers also who have experience in Chechnya, in Syria, and so on, and they tell me, and I was shocked, they tell me that this war is a very cruel war. It's a very rough war. It's when it's about human suffering, when it's about like indiscriminate shelling of people, it's worse every now and then than Syria. So this is what, just to add.
Okay. So and then so what makes this war then uncomparable or special? What would you say, or is Bogdan, Iryna?
I can tell that Russia is fighting for their artificially made identity. They build this identity, they manage the whole world trust to this identity as completely artificial identity. This identity can be real only when Ukrainians doesn't exist. And Russia is fighting for their nice European culture identity. It was completely not truth, but they trust themselves for this. Only Ukrainian should not exist, then everything will be okay.
That's of course a strange thing. If you think that way, normal people wouldn't think that way. So normal people wouldn't say, well, Bogdan exists and I can only exist if Bogdan doesn't exist anymore.
Or when I am not existing as Ukrainian, when I am told that, yes, I am younger brother, I am your slave, then it's okay, that's all right. Okay, we are brothers, you are younger brother, you are like slave, you did what I tell, it's okay, then it's comfortable, it should be forever.
Mhm. So,
Or if I doesn't agree, I should be killed.
mhm.
Very simple.
So this is a war in a sense as a zero-sum game. Eh? So I can only win.
Exactly. Exactly. Why the diplomatic negotiations? Why all this peaceful rhetorics of Macron, Italians, Germans? Unrealistic. It's really zero-sum game. Very good explanation.
How do you see this war with Orysya when it comes to what this, because this war has such a special meaning in our history now. I was sort of saying that, like with Hegel, the zeitgeist is in Ukraine. That's all.
I think one really important thing about this war is it has the same source. The source of it is unprocessed past, so to say. It's why this happens today to Ukrainians, and why this happens especially in relation to Russia, is this: we are very close to each other. We belong to the same empire for quite a while. And the moment when we started our stories on our own, one of the most important challenges for Russia was not to let Ukraine to get some kind of path that will really make it a story of success. And that would not be, I mean, this is not the story of Cain and Abel, of two brothers. It's also, I think the problem, let's say, if we use this metaphor of Cain and Abel, is the problem that Cain was not able to create a future of his own for himself, so to say, a future that would not consist in, that would not be built in this mythological past. The Russian elites, the Russian intelligentsia, so to say, was not able to produce a type of a narrative that would allow Russians to see themselves as a flourishing modern nation, a nation that is, so to say, doomed to success, being just on its own. They see their, so to say, success only as an empire, and returning always back into this false memories of the empire of Russian Tsar, and then the empire of the Soviet Union. Because what we see now is this trying to compose it's an interesting creature that they are creating. It's a monster, so to say, in the Hobbesian sense, that is head of it looks like a Russian Tsar, and the legs of it looks like a Soviet state, and they really cannot make a sensible creature of that. But the problem is that they have no other. They lack imagination to create something that would be something different. They cannot imagine. So for them, it's also a 0-0 game, because it's a self-destructive game, so to say. Mm-hmm. And I even, let's imagine that they win. What kind of future they predict to themselves? Do they have really a plan afterwards, or just conquering Ukraine would be the final? I don't think. But I think what we are really facing is a crisis of imagination within Russian elites, Russian government, and Russian intellectuals, that they cannot really produce a sensible future for themselves. And we are really suffering now of that. And that is really different situation. At least, I mean, we don't know an example of that kind of conflict happening, I think, in a human civilization. some.
You're speaking about this unprocessed past. Yeah?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I don't know if you share this idea, Iryna. This has to do with this unprocessed past in Russia. You mean?
You know, I even participated in a very important intellectual project based at Cambridge back in 2010, 2013, which was called Memory Wars in Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and Belarus. And at that time already, I have understood how much dehumanization is going on in Russian culture, in Russian media, of Ukrainians, of Ukrainian past, and especially of Ukrainian present. But I also want to pay your attention that if many of us estimated that carbohydrates were the major Russian exports within the last 3 or 4 decades, actually it was not carbohydrates only, but carbohydrates plus corruption attached to the export. So when 1989 came, Berlin Wall collapsed, and many Velvet Revolution actually succeeded. And so-called Soviet camp or Soviet satellite states started to leave the Soviet orbit. Something very important happened. It's not the human values and democracy entered the Russian ground, but the Russian corruption entered and penetrated to the West, to the Central Europe, and also to Ukraine. We are often accused of being quite corrupted country, but I insist now it was a transfer country of Russian corruption further west and further south and further in other directions, let's say. So it's not that easy to understand how entangled and how complex this story of rotting was. But what actually made me really suffer and what made me in awe is not only ideology which is backing this war, but the level to which Russian ordinary society is rotten, how much their moral values and their humanity is damaged. And this is something of which I'm in a big grief.
Mm. And do you have some explanation for that? What is rotten, this internal rot comes from? Or maybe all of you. That's maybe an...
I'm helpless to explain. I wanted to believe that the processes are more or less parallel in Russian society and in Ukrainian society. Just Russian democratization is less successful, but still it's going on and has its own opposition and has quite possible alternative futures. But these futures were blocked. They were blocked in the brutal way, especially, I believe, in the second term of Putin as a president. And he deliberately decided that this will be a kind of authoritarian state, and at any point it could slide into dictatorship. And probably the most fearful, the most dangerous moment was when Russian society, more or less at the verge of 2010, decided that there is no Putin, there is no Russia. So they themselves put everything on stake and related the future of their own country just to one person.
Could you say, well, I was still puzzled about this internal rot or this unprocessed history. If I might add something myself, something special from and then also thinking about Hannah Arendt, for instance, who said already in 1953 there are 2 types and even more types of totalitarianism. That was the Nazi variant and that was the Stalin variant. But and compared to Germany, German history in this Nazi variant was relatively short, 1933 to 1945. But the let's say the totalitarian state under Stalinism, beginning with Bolshevism and then ending with a more or less milder form in the Soviet state, was almost a 3/4 of a century, even longer, so to say. And that was a very cruel period for Russians and so on. if Orysya says, well, there is some unprocessed history, so that I'm always thinking about this kind of unprocessed history, coming to terms with this. I think one author who I very much admire, Atkins, said is a kind of internal suicide who took place in the Russian society, and coming to terms with that. So to say, that is this.
No, it's not internal suicide, it's external suicide. They actually are trying to kill us in order to kill themselves.
Yeah, okay, but in that sense, that's, of course, I can agree. But I was thinking about this not coming to terms with your own history, in the sense that you are so compared with Germany. Germany had its ethnic foes. These were Jews, so you killed Jews, but Russian killed Russians. And so when it came to the totalitarian history, could that be something that it makes so immensely hard to deal with? And then instead of that, dealing with that, you are thinking you're dealing with someone else. So
I have a quite important observation here to coin into our discussion, that the fact that Russians were killing Russians, or Russians were sacrificing the best minds of Russia for the sake of certain utopia or certain project of the future, like Stalinist repressions during the so-called war communist time, I believe they now using this as an excuse that every people within the Soviet Empire or within the Russian Empire had an equal portion of suffering, an equal share of suffering. That's why there is no need, for example, to have some particular historical judgment, historical process over Stalin and Stalinism. But at the same time, I would like to recall that many of those who were repressed by Soviets and then escaped to the West, like, for example, Joseph Brodsky or Solzhenitsyn, being in America, traveling across Europe, they would defend the Russian imperial picture of the world, and they would insist on Ukraine or Little Russia to be just integral part of the Russian people, and never accepted the fact that we are very different and we are toxic to each other. So actually you better leave us alone. And it's a very interesting and problematic moment that contemporary Russians who come to Ukrainian ground in the military boots seems like they knew very little about this Russian imperial history, because they are threatening, for example, Odessa. They are threatening Kiev. They are threatening Kharkiv with missiles, with bombs, with artillery, with everything. And they are trying to null or to shrink to the ground zero these cities and towns which took important part in the Russian imperial history as such. So I don't quite understand how it could be possible. And my answer to this is that ideologically, this war is happening in the heads on the very top management level. But on the ordinary level, this is just war of hatred and destruction. And it's not ideologically loaded at all. People in Bucha or in Irpin, they were not ideologically loaded when they were killing civilians or raping children. The stolen fridge or the stolen water closet hardly could be ideologically explained.
Yeah, but that's maybe the point I'm trying to make, and maybe Michiel can add something, is that this is not ideologically, it's a radical form of dehumanizing the other. So it's what you see. So it doesn't matter who lived in Bucha, and we see it now in other places too. Executions in Mariupol and so on, where the stories come on. And there is actually this report on genocide by New Lines Institute and the Raoul Wallenberg Center, if I remember well, what also documents this genocide. But is this this is what really puzzles me. So in a sense that what happened to in Russia is this totally dehumanizing of Ukraine and Ukrainians, so to say, and thinking that you are somehow legitimate to do what you do. So
yeah. So what I was expecting the 24th, when I was waking up because of this boom in Kharkiv, then I thought, okay, I need to go away because there will be at least lots of destruction. There will be a big war. And I was expecting like lots of blood and destruction because I was thinking, okay, Ukrainians will fight. I was sure about it. And of course it happened. But this way of what happened in Bucha, of course, and also in Mariupol, but also in these villages near Kharkiv. This is what I could not imagine, because it's apart from any, how to say, battle between Russians and Ukrainians. It looks like more like a, but as I understand, I was also in Irpin like 4 weeks ago, and Demidov, which is also near Kiev, there were guys from Siberia, very young soldiers, they told us, very young, 18, 19 years old, but they were very polite in Demidov. In Irpin, it was people from, well, as we know, right, people from very far away republics in Russia, not from Moscow. So I'm really trying to, to not say so much about Russia because I simply don't know. I'm not working in Russia. So, but this is what I could add from my side, that what we see, the story of the victims in Ukraine is, of course, it's a very, let's say, different layers of Russians, so to say, right, who are operating in Ukraine and who are really behaving everywhere differently. So it's complex, complicated, but what we know from, of course, from the worst examples is something which we cannot imagine, and which makes my colleagues who are having experience in Syria and Chechnya say that it's really a cruel campaign.
It's really a cruel campaign. Bogdan.
May I add?
Yeah, of course, Orysya.
Okay, Bogdan first, then I'll.
Ladies first.
All right. So one thing that I was thinking when you mentioned about Hannah Arendt, and also when we were talking about Iryna mentioned about the lack of morality, I'm thinking, the whole thing about morality, that it's never a personal thing. It's always public. Morality is something that includes the other person. And one of the things that Hannah Arendt writes in The Sources of Totalitarianism, when she asks how this becomes possible, for example, in Germany in the 30s, is the radical atomization of the society. And I think what we face now in the contemporary Russia, and it's also a situation produced through the history, through this past that they faced, it's really a radical atomization of the society, which is very different from the Ukrainian contemporary society. It's like the opposite. It's almost like excluding parts of each other. And what we see, the lack of morality is actually, it's also the lack of understanding and respect of the other human being. You don't understand why you really, and probably it's also an answer why they believe so much in the strong hand of a strong leader that will help and save them, as if they have no personal agency of their own. They have no, they don't believe, it really strikes me, Russians do not believe that 2 of them, 3 of them, a group of them can do a real change in their lives. They need the whole structure with the appointed king from the above. And one thing about this king or the star figure that they have, it's nothing that comes from the human nature, but something that is given from from the divine part. That is fate that is put on us, but we are not really participants in that actively. We receive our tsar and we take our destiny as such. And I think what we see now, and we see really this total terrible dehumanization that Michiel is talking about, that we face, is really another side of this culture of dehumanization, that this rotten structure of the society that happened to Russians in this really heavy totalitarian system. And it was much longer. It was really a continuous system that fell on its own nation. So to say, they became the very first victims of their own empire.
Yeah, that's very well put, I think. Yeah.
And that's what I think is really what we see. This is the result that we are facing now: demoralization, inability, and also desire to ruin somebody that shows some other pattern of the social behavior is really a problem.
Yeah, this one social scientist in Russia. He's doing for decades already social research on what you could say the Homo Sovieticus. So that's Alexander Gutkov. Yes, if I say it correctly, and he says something like that. He says there is such an, and I think already always about this 80 years, 70 years totalitarianism, there's some empty space created in you if you have to live under these circumstances for such a long time, so to say. And it makes it even more possible, difficult to fill this space. And if you look at Russian history from the last, let's say, when Putin comes to power, and not from the first moment, there is a persistent and consistent rewriting of Russian history taking place. So again, Stalin is again commemorated, is adored even. There was even a polls in Russia, and there's a current line that who was the greatest Russian, and that was Stalin. Mm-hmm. And that will, and he gained votes in these years, so to say. I don't know.
I believe I have at least part of the answer to this question, and my hypothesis is as such: that Russian Soviet people, they still had dissidents, and there was an important anti-Soviet movement in the Soviet Russia, same as in Soviet Baltic states, in Soviet Ukraine, in Soviet Georgia, Armenia, and so on. But there was no anti-Putin, enough anti-Putin generation in these recent years. And for me, there is this could be explained through the reality of who raised whom, and how the generation actually has been formed. I understand that 60 years we were raised but by non-Soviet grannies. Their grandfathers and grandmothers were non-Soviet citizens, so they actually could inject, inflict some human values into their grandchildren, and to make them in a kind idealist within the Soviet system, which were thinking, well, the system is going very wrong, but we can fix it. When it was not possible to fix it, they started to be anti-Soviet. But those people who came to power after the verge of the millennium, after the year 2000, they were raised by Soviet grandparents. And these grandparents are very nostalgic about Soviet Empire, which they idealize and in which they spent their whole young years. But internally, they were already very conformist, and their moral picture of the world and moral picture of themselves was already very blurred. So they helped this idea that everything is very complex. You could hardly tell truth from the fake. And because of that, maybe there are many possible explanations and none is correct. So who cares?
Yeah, that's a good point. And when you read in that sense about what struck me in reading about Russia since 1991, there were of course efforts to produce something like Maidan. 2012 was a moment, but there's never a real Maidan in the sense of a self-reflection on the own society, so to say. And so, and if you think about that, that what struck me is that Russia seemed more or less like a toy in the hands of people who basically want to do their own things and have a kind of government who takes care of the rest, apart from some serious crises who took place, the inflation and so on. And so there was never a Maidan-like thing in Russia. And it was more like, how do I get a life with enough of money and a kind of a bit of a future? Nobody will say, well, you're not allowed to do that. But this is what maybe, again, is not a serious problem in these 30 years to think about. Okay, I'm living now in Russia. This is a country with a huge history, with a huge loaded history, a huge tragic history. So let's do something about this history. And let's see what happened before the Great Patriotic War, for instance. So this has never taken place. We had memorial, and memorial is prohibited in Russia nowadays. And that was the only NGO who really made a difference on this part of point. Okay, but Bogdan, you are the one who want to make the contribution.
Okay, just everybody in Ukraine and worldwide are surprised of this terrible providing of Russians in Bucha, in Irpin, all over where they come. Then to understand it, one should look back to the history, how this generation was created, how this type of people were created. Just from 1917, when they come into the power, for 2 years, they made a so-called red terrorism. And it was official explanation. They kill everybody who disagreed. Just everybody was killed. And Lenin told as much killed as better. Priests, intelligent people, everybody. Later, 21, 32, they made artificial hunger. When this very difficult to kill one by one, then they kill millions by the artificial hunger. When they come in 1939 to the West Ukraine and West Belarus, it was enough that you walk on the street with glasses. It was enough to be arrested, to prison, or killed. It means they kill every different from themselves, every different person. You understand that all others should be killed. Is no time to change them. No man, no problem, is Stalin told. Later, 42, how they change a situation in the war. They put on the back, they put the troops of KGB, and they kill everybody who step back. When you go to attack, you have maybe 1%, maybe 0.1% to survive. But when you step back, you are 100% killed. What they sometimes do now by Chechenians, it's repeated now, and our soldiers prove it. Then in 43, when front came back westwards, it was a special decree of Stalin to kill every man, try to kill every man, grown-up man, who live few months under the German administration, when they see something different from the Russia, from the Soviet Union. All these people were at once recruited and put to the front without any guns, without any training, just to be killed by Germans. And it was millions of people were killed. It means kill everybody, everybody who is different. Then they create a nation without zero empathy. They don't to kill you. You can now listen a conversation between wife and husband, between mother and son, and it's unbelievable, but for them it's normal. We should understand what people they are without any illusion. Sorry.
And what you're saying, there is a continuity, there is a consistency in this violence, in this ruthlessness, what we see now in Ukraine, what we see in Bucha and other places. That's what you're saying. So you shouldn't be surprised to see that.
Yes, it is supported, but they are relatives, but the nation, it is supported.
So this becomes a bit more depressing now, so to say, because it is, of course, a very dark picture, what rises in that sense. So we are now a bit to our last question. So is there a future for Ukraine?
I would doubt much more is there a future for Russia as such.
Mm-hmm.
But Ukraine, I believe, unblocked its an alternative future. Ukraine is now in power of a narrative, which is the universal one. And I believe nobody can just suffocate or block this narrative about the new brave nation, which is fighting for the right cause. It's a universal cause because it's self-defense for the freedom and development and better future. And the fact that millions of Ukrainians now are individually integrating into European Union also make it more possible that Ukraine actually will make its way further west.
Yeah, thank you. Bogdan, how do you see that? Is there a future for Ukraine?
You know what happened now on this 100 days? I don't remember, something like 70% of our people never went abroad, and something like 40% of our people never leave the small area when they used to live. They never move, they don't see something else. And now this war, they put up all these people, they mix them, and they run to the West Ukraine or abroad, etc. And then now through Lviv, 100,000 people pass. And now we see like a kaleidoscope picture of what our people, what our nation looks like in reality. And sometimes it's extremely surprising. Mm-hmm. It's like a schizophrenia. Of course, the majority is very nice people, it's normal people, and we are really sorry that they should leave their houses and their properties, etc. But some are very aggressive people, of course, Russian speaking. They run from the Russians, but they wish to us that Russians come here and kill us. It's really schizophrenia. Mm. They run not to Russia, they run to us. But they love Russians, and they want that we are so different here in Lviv and in Ternopil. They wish that Russians will come here and kill us. It's understandable, but it's reality. Such people will never change, and we should understand the next election. Again, the homeless alcoholic has the same voice on election as a good expert or professor. Then once we should get this normal parliament, once we should get these people in power with some morality, with some thinking about priority of country and nation, but not own pocket and position, how to manage it? It's difficult.
It's difficult.
You should think about it.
I agree that. That's right. And how do you see that, Michiel? Maybe we can change the question a bit. Like, is there a future for Ukraine? Because So what kind
Well,
of
how to say this in a good way? Like you only exist in the eyes of the other, right? There is such an. Sorry, it's late. So I don't know this exact expression, but what I see, yes, people are internally displaced, right? So people within Ukraine, they get to know each other, right? Very well nowadays. But also we in the Netherlands, we get to know the Ukrainians. So we see an existing country, we see people. We see it's a strange paradox, but at the school of my daughter, this morning I brought my daughter to school. She's 10 years old here in Netherlands. And what is interesting is that we can see who are the Ukrainian kids. There are 20 Ukrainian kids now at her school. We can clearly see who are the Ukrainian kids because I don't know all the kids at the school. They are white, they look like us. They are European looking, they are European kids. My daughter is on a very international school, I should explain. It's like lots of people from universities and so on who place their kids on their school with all kinds of colors, all kinds of backgrounds. So we recognize the Ukrainian kids because they look like our kids. So this is interesting. Like we see Ukrainians coming now. It's the first time. Of course, there was visa-free traveling, etc. But now in the Netherlands, we know what Ukrainians are, and there is, I think, there is lots of positive thoughts. Of course, then it's not about color, but it's about so you are from Ukraine. You are from Mariupol. So I know where Mariupol is. I know where Kharkiv is. I know where Kiev is. And this is for me as a correspondent who was always fighting to get his place in the news, like Ukraine, somewhere far. It's quite amazing to see this. So Ukraine is existing, and Ukraine has a future already in this sense. I think that that we in the Netherlands, at least we know that what Ukraine is and where it is, and that there are great people over there.
Yeah, thank you. And Orysya, what comes to your mind when you think about the future of Ukraine?
Well, because I work in a university, so my audience is always the same age. It's always 17 and 18, and I see this generation growing up, how they change. They're very different. Every 3 or 4 years, you see really how the values change, how the perspectives change, how the language changes. It's always this really it's like a really floating, so to say, reality of the nation. And what I really see, and also I'm very proud of this, that our youngsters are really free people. Really, they are, so to say, they have what I call the internal core. They know what they want to be, and they want to be. They have autonomy and subjectivity on their own, and that really gives me hope for the future of this nation. And with this autonomy and subjectivity and being an individual, they also are able to create networks, and that is also very important, as we see in this war, being able to form not just a world of your own, but the world of the communication and interaction with other people, to create, so to say, a global, a common world. And that, in this sense, I really believe that there is a future for Ukraine. And I'm defeating an enemy is a technical thing. And for that, we really need a support of the world and of other governments. But creating a future of our own is really, it's something more than just a technical thing. And I think we have a potential, and I really believe in that potential. And for me, it's just a matter of that we create them a proper grounds for them to flourish, so to say.
It's also this question of the future is very connected to what we add to this. Huh? So
Right.
saying that, yes. So, okay, we are almost finished.
I
from
can
this.
add to this that
Yeah.
as a university professor, I see the same thing as Orysya is saying, but plus they not only are very free, but they know the freedom comes with responsibility. And I must say that the war is another university. So actually they are now graduating from the two. And because of that, they are really adult. There is no place for infantile generation in Ukraine anymore. These young people are very, very responsible. They are adult, and I believe they are politically minded. So they are mobilized for the good, and they understand also you have to keep internal islands of peace even in a situation of the big war. This is something which just astonished me, that young people teach me how to find these small periods or small islands of peace, because they say we fight to keep the human face, and that's why always there is place. Sharing is caring, and you would not share anger to each other. You should share peace, love, support, and care. And I believe, yes, because of that, I see a big hope, not only for Ukraine itself, but for the whole region.
Yeah, thank you. That's the same question. Eh? So this future and where your answers brings me in finishing up is that for me, one of the most remarkable things in these 100 years is that 100 years, 100 days, of course, is that it changes not the picture only in the pictures of responsibility, not only in Ukraine, but I think this is a great game changer of maybe it can be, let's be careful about it. Not about for Ukraine, but also for Europe and also for the world, so to say, not to make it a small story. And if you see that, what the war does to me, to us in the Netherlands, but also to our institutions like the European Union. I suppose you will be very critical about the European Union, but what is happening there is unprecedented. And what it does to NATO. It's also, which you will be very critical about it, but it is unprecedented. And so it is like that it adds something to the world, but makes it necessary to re-evaluate all our institutions, not only in Ukraine, but also in the Netherlands, even our democratic institutions in the Netherlands, in the sense that there is no democracy if you don't have to, are you not prepared to take the responsibility to a democracy. And that's, for me, one of the things to think about, or a lot of things to think about these 100 days of war. But that opens, maybe very careful, a way to a different future where we all built it. And I hope that it won't last again 100 days, although I'm afraid that the prospect is not very, let's say, maybe realistic to talk with Bogdan. So will the war be over in 3 months? Who knows? But good. Okay. I want to thank you very much for being here in this maybe a historical moment. 99 days of war, tomorrow 100 days of war, to think about it with each other. And what's made very clear in this, the way of our thinking, that we are more or less exploring what's on our road, so to say, instead of having prefab answers to a lot of questions. So I want to thank you very much for being here, and wish ourselves a good and hopeful future. Thank you.